Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Four Mothers of Women's Spirituality Online Resource Center. I'm your hostess, Vajra Ma, and the curator of the project. And today we're here with Judy Grahn, who's going to be speaking about Paula Gunn Allen. Good morning, Judy.
Well, good morning, Vajra. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk about Paula Gunn Allen's work because she's an important contributor to women's spirituality, and I think that doing some readings from her work directly will help us understand the importance of her place in it.
I completely agree. I'm very glad that you're doing this in her behalf. So what I'm going to do to start is give a short introduction to put a perspective, a larger context around Paula Gunn Allen's work. And, well, first I wanted to say that you will be explaining that you're a very, very close friend with her, but I want to let everyone to know that Judy Grahn, who we're speaking with today, is internationally known as a poet, a writer, and cultural theorist. And her writings helped fuel globally the second wave feminist, gay, lesbian activism, and as well as women's and queer spirituality. So I wanted to make sure that people know who they're listening to. And, of course, Judy has her own interview also in this series, and she also spoke on behalf of Audre Lorde, with whom she was very close friends. So the women's spirituality movement emerged as a major component of the second wave of women's liberation. And the women's second wave took place in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and women's spirituality emerged in the 70s and 80s. But many people today do not know about these courageous, radical, and by radical I mean to the root, women who are the foremothers of women's spirituality, who developed authentic spiritual experiences and practices outside the boundaries of patriarchal religion. These feminists followed their passion, their conviction, and an inner knowing that was beyond what could be written down, but came from deep inside. And they also built upon a growing body of scholarly historical knowledge, and some brought through intact indigenous wisdom to connect us back to the nature and female-honoring spirituality that precedes the past 6,000 to 10,000 years of patriarchal father gods. So the foremothers, along with the other feminists, pioneered a diverse spiritual orientation based in respect, reverence, and relationship with all. The foremothers of that emergence are not only historically significant, but many are actively doing and evolving their vital work today, and that is why we created the Resource Center, to provide an historical overview via personal testimonies and recollections of the formative first 2 decades of the women's spirituality movement, and to learn about the presence of their ongoing work today. We invite you to meet these women now in the form of taped interviews, with additional interviews and resources to be expanded as time goes on. Our interview today with Judy Grahn on behalf of Paula Gunn Allen is taking place in the year 2018. And Judy, I'm going to turn it over to you to read Paula's bio and then share with us how you know her and know her work and what its significance is.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Paula Gunn Allen was born Paula Marie Francis in Albuquerque, New Mexico, October 24th, 1939, and passed away to the other side May 29th, 2008 in Fort Bragg, California. Paula was an American poet, novelist, scholar, and critic whose work combines the influences of feminism and her Native American heritage. She's of mixed European, Lebanese American, and Laguna Pueblo background. Paula centered her work as a critic and biographer on foregrounding and setting in context Native American writing. Her own essays described most Native American pre-colonial peoples as matrilineal, and she also wrote biography of the lives of Native women, including Pocahontas. Her poetry and scholarly work pulled on Native American mythology, especially stories of Spider Grandmother and Thought Woman from Laguna. and also Plains Indians traditions. She was a professor and taught at several different schools, including San Francisco State, UC Berkeley, and UCLA, where she was in the English department. She held an MFA as well as a PhD, published 7 collections of poetry, 5 nonfiction essay books, a novel, and 2 biographies of Native women. She also edited a number of collections of Native women's work. You can see from this, what a full career that was and how important she was. She was really the person, I think, who set a context, put a frame around all contemporary Native work, and giving it a way to be taught in the university and a way for Native people to find each other's work and for non-Indians to understand it better, have a better vocabulary for describing it. She was a scholar.
I completely agree with you, Judy, because her book, Grandmothers of the Light, was very influential with me, being a white woman, I am, and really, as you said, understanding Native American traditions better, and the really beautiful cosmology, the sophisticated spiritual understanding. So I just wanted to chirp in and say, yes.
Yes, absolutely. And for Paula, she used scholarship. Was a folklorist, but she was also a seeker for. It was a personal journey for her, for spirit and for spiritual power. And she concentrated a lot on the renewal of creation by women, the continual renewal of creation and contributions of Native women. So I wrote about her, and I wrote about Audrey and 7 other women poets in a book that I published in 1985 called The Highest Apple, Sappho and the Lesbian Poetic Tradition. It's a lesbian poetic tradition, not the, but I didn't know that at the time. So I wanted to just start off by saying the way that I knew her first was as a poet, as reading her poetry and being impressed with it, and then secondly, living with her for 5 years, from about spring 1981 to spring 1986. We were lovers and partners and fellow scholars, sister seekers, and we had it was just one long intellectual conversation that we had together, and we did some events together that were some spiritual teachings that featured her as a spiritual teacher. There was a coffee house in Oakland at that time, a women's coffee house called Mama Bear's. Mama Bear's bookstore and coffee house, and we met there Sunday mornings. I would read poetry. Paula would give talks, bringing out the particular spiritual tradition she was steeped in. But her journey to get there was typical of so many of us. It was a recovering of what had become a lost tradition, as her family, her great-great-grandmother left the reservation and actually worked in hotel systems in the Southwest. And the family lived near the reservation. Her father had a trading store there. They lived very near the reservation and on land that was really not the United States, really is reservation land. But they didn't go onto the reservation. They didn't go to the Laguna Village. They just intersected with a lot of people from there. And Paula, at the age of 6, excuse me, and this is a tragedy, Paula was sent to live with an aunt in Albuquerque and attended a boarding school, a religious school at that time, and became one of those hate to say it this way, but, like many of us, a sort of not well-parented child who was always then hungry for a certain kind of mothering. I think that's a theme that you could probably pretty easily trace in women's spirituality leadership. So she wrote a novel, and in the novel she has a description of being at such a boarding. This was a Catholic school, and I just want to read a section of that. Our main character is called Ethany, but this piece of it is really her. She remembered the two sisters who for a brief time did not look half dead, Sister Mary Grace and Sister Claire. Sister Mary Grace and one of the other boarders were playing the piano. Sister Claire had rolled up the sleeves of her habit, pinned the long veil back, as decorously as they often did when they were going to scrub the floor. Instead, she began to dance. She grabbed one of the girls and began to whirl her around. Sister Mary Grace turned to watch. The tall, heavy girl and the tiny, delicate nun danced and laughed with delight. The girl playing the piano struck up another tune, a polka. The girl dancing with Sister Claire went spinning off to sprawl, laughing on a chair next to Ethany. They crowed with delight. Sister Claire danced up to Sister Mary Grace. She drew Sister Mary Grace to her feet. She pulled her out onto the floor. They began to dance, laughing, giggling like girls. Their faces growing rosy and gleaming from sweat and exertion, they danced the polka and laughed. About a week later, Sister Claire was gone, sent to another school or back to the mother house, the place where they were trained and where they lived when they retired. The girls talked about it in whispers. They eyed Sister Mary Grace, whose face was heavy and dull with grief, or with something that was not joy. They knew, sort of, what had happened. They were subdued, all of them. No one laughed or danced much the rest of the year. Sister Claire had been sent away, and Sister Mary Grace must have wept. The girls said they must have been in love, and nodded to each other and whispered. No one said anything about it being wrong. Ethany thought now, all these years later, how glad they had all been that someone there was able to love, to laugh and shine and work and play and dance, and how very bereft they all felt when that love was sent away. So I'm reading from a section of a novel that Paula Gunn wrote, and I think this encapsulates really in a certain way her own experience in a Catholic school as a girl who became very lonely. She just saw her family in the summers and on holidays. And she was someone who, as she would often say and relate and tell, even I think in public, that she learned to read comic books and humor books to give herself a sense of humor that would allow her to endure that loneliness. And it characterized her that everybody would always say what a great sense of humor Paula had. So that's one theme. Now I'm going to go through and read from her work, and some of this is quotes that I placed in my own book about her and other poets, which is called The Highest Apple. So this is about the importance of woman-centeredness, not only in Paula's work, but in the culture that she drew from the most of her own background, the Pueblo Indian, the Laguna Pueblo people especially. So this is now me talking. The nature of place is female. That is the word derived from the female body, from placenta, the place where the child is joined to its mother. Who is your mother? is a question, according to Paula Gunn, of prime importance to the Pueblo Indian world. Location in your mother's house is what gives you your sense of place in the social world. Location is a similar idea, as placenta being related to the same root as lochial, meaning birthing, as in lochial blood. The way home for women is the way to ourselves. Now, she emphasized the centrality of the female in her work, and in her work on American Native American Indian traditions, which she studied at great length. Just absolutely steeped herself in everything that had been written up, into the 80s and then on. And she said that the centrality of the female was just extremely important to understanding who the people were and what the clash of cultures was all about when the colonialists arrived. So, Vajra, you were saying it's common for all of us to imagine that the patriarchy started 10,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago. But for some peoples, and this certainly applies to Native peoples on this continent, South America, Africa, other places, India, that interface is not that old. It's 400 years old. And then, the farther west you get in the United States, the more that might disappear. But the Spanish arrived about 400 years ago in California and Arizona and New Mexico contexts where these people were living. So it's not that long ago.
Thank goodness that there was. Thank goodness that people have kept that wisdom and traditions and knowledge intact. Those 400 years. It's been
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So in Paula's work, placement of the American Indian as a female in the central position completely alters the patriarchal belief that the Indian people were marauding horse riders living on the fringe of a quote, civilized, unquote, society. They were civilized societies and still are. Allen's work pulls this false idea away, like the flimsy justifying curtain that it is, revealing the tribal mother who is actually there. So we see, rather than exotic relics of Barbaria, the women, the tribal people, the originators, who are central providers of all of our wealth in this country, our health, and our knowledge of freedom and rights of the individual. The American dream itself lies behind the curtain Allen pulls off for us. The woman who is there is the source. She is the underlying gynarchic network that sustains all the superstructure of industrial life. And I'm now thinking, here it goes, nor will the things we value and neglect to value, the live earth, the good food, healing herbs, and great continental spaciousness, the crisp, clean air, lovely, fierce animals, and the essential individual freedoms, nor will they survive our neglect if we neglect and destroy the gynarchic and tribal people who produce them. In particular, I must say, these are the people and their southern relations who produce most of what we call food, not only here but all around the world. By recognizing and revaluing the gynarchic and essentially woman-bonded matrix underlying what we say we treasure, we may yet realize the golden possibility. We may all even see that we too came from and can reconstruct such worlds. So it sounds like an exaggeration to say that this is the foundation for industrial life, but it really truly is if you look particularly at the food contributions. but also at the ideas, at the idea of a constitutional democracy, which the Iroquois women contributed to. Yeah. And Paula was one of the people who first pointed that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it gives another perspective or a wider view or deeper view of the phrase that's going around now, the future is female. Because it's either going to be female or there's not going to be a future, basically.
Exactly. If there's some hope, then that's where it lies, and that's why we are concentrating on it. It's not just that we're quirky or selfish or something, but that we're really trying to bring things to light that can help the whole world as it is right now. The place I want to go now has to do with something that in the highest apple I called common differences, common similarities and common differences, that has to do with the different perspectives between someone who comes from, as Paula did, it comes from a people who were subjected to a genocidal relations with the colonial powers, and those of us who haven't been. I'm going to read the poem, and then maybe we can talk about it just for a minute or two. It's a difficult poem to listen to for some people. I'll try to read it as well as I can. But that's my setup, that this is about common differences. It's habitual, I think, for Americanized mainstream Euro-American women to imagine that everyone's the same. And that was very, very true in the early 80s. That's, of course, been challenged many times. Audre Lorde's helped to challenge that. And the whole idea of intersectionality has now replaced what at that time was simply a notion that we were just all in the same common mind, and we weren't. So this is Paula's contribution to that is in my book, Highest Apple. I'm going to read the whole poem. It's called The Garden, and it's from Paula's book, Shadow Country. Scene 1. Sky still bright, we weed, companionable. She on her side of the low wall, me on mine. They leave their shells in the ground, she says. See these holes? I don't know why. They have to be dug up and thrown away. She holds up a transparent thing, tissue pattern for an insect dress. Her petunias, my corn, beans, squash, and I nod amiably. In the hills last night, 2 more animals dismembered. Rectum, lip, nostril, vagina split. Bodies left bloodless on the unmarked grass. Something out there, something unknown. I straighten, groaning, wipe sweat from my eyes. Mystic impulse all around, slicing holes in air, digging bad dreams in daylight. Sun like a corpse over me. Sky blooming deep, a shroud. Scene 2. Unmannered, soft as night, air keening, sky building. What manners these? Fear lightly easing itself over back wall, through trees. Starshine beginning at the edge. Her dress moves with ease, eyes glitter, hair so soft in evening wind she recalls summer nights, arms like branches singing, body sinking graceful into dusk. Comfort of lounge chair holds buttocks back, pliant neck. She dreams of Pentecost, tongues of flame above her shining hair, longs for beatitude, so suited to this place. A manner of speaking touches her lips lightly, careful for her carelessness. Words slip cautiously toward formation. Birds settle in for the night, crying. Daylight evaporates as she whirls her drink, sips, cold with perfect ease against her teeth, rests against cushions, soft as dissolving clouds overhead. trees by the back wall begin to stir, ominous. Sky goes dark. She doesn't see. She doesn't make a sound. Pentecost shimmers, flows from her hair between her thighs. Scene 3. Light angling. Volunteers face ashen. Up 2 days and nights, starshine is not what got in her eyes. He used a knife on her vagina, she tells me, and maybe the hatchet we found. Beside the bed, the blood, my God, she tells me. Outside surgery, we stand, uneasy, faceless, longing for the carelessness of birds. Scene 4. Haunted. Tissue paper hulls. Bad dreams in daylight. No sleep in dark. Before my eye, a shadow. Photograph of Brazilian Indian woman hung by the ankles from a pole. Long hair sweeping down, blowing in the laden breeze. White hunter standing next to her. Spread legs. She is naked. She is dead. So that was Paula Gunn Allen's poem, The Garden, and it's a tough to absorb poem about some differences inside people's minds depending on their experience and the experience of their communities, how wounded their communities might be, or how protected they might be. Mm-hmm. So, it's an unresolved theme. There's no resolution. The two women are placed in a garden, which is their commonality as females. But the reality of what is happening there is entirely different for one than for the other.
Yeah.
So, that is, it's a courageous poem to have written at that time. And she just was quite outspoken, quite fearless, a Scorpio. I don't know. Your experience with Scorpios. Go ahead.
I thank you for reading it because women's spirituality, whether from the Native American lineages or old European research and awakening, etc., it comes from the understanding of that deep violation of woman. And yes, it has been experienced differently, but the root of it is this horribly violent assault on woman life giver. And
yes,
yes. Yeah, it needs
that's
to
right.
be
It's
spoken. Yeah.
Yes. That's just for some of us. It happened so long ago. We've lost the memory, and we have this, perhaps another sense that comfort belongs to us, and for some people, comfort never does belong.
Right, and as Andrea Dworkin said, women who are complying, say Republican right-wing women or whatever, they're just surviving. They found a way to survive and adapt, and it's a loss of soul for everyone.
And what Paula kept finding is that for women, the central piece is not about the tragedy and the dying. It really is about the continuity. And in this is a fragment of a poem that's about the primary deity of American Pueblo Indian culture, according to Paula, is of the Kiris people, is Spider Grandmother. And this is a fragment that Paula wrote about her. Spider Grandmother is very tiny, but she's also the Milky Way. So just imagine that, if that's your deity and that's how you're thinking about deity. It's really absolutely delightful and stunning. And Spider Grandmother she's a weaver, so she brought weaving, but also she made a basket, and hot coals could be carried in the basket. and so she brought fire to human beings. And this is just a few little lines that I quoted in Highest Apple that Paula wrote. She was given the work of weaving the strands of her body, her pain, her vision, into creation, and the gift of having created to disappear. After her, I sit on my laddered rain-bearing rug and mend the tear with string. So this idea of reweaving the world, which runs through as a pattern in women's spirituality in all different kinds of ways, all different ways that people talk about it, is just front and center there, with Paula, and with this astonishing deity who takes the form of a spider. So I want to read one other little thing. It's not little, of course. From Grandmothers of the Light, a description of Thought Woman. I think that's what I've got marked here. So Grandmother Spider, Thought Woman, thought the earth, the sky, the galaxy, and all that is into being. And as she thinks, so we are. I'm quoting Paula on this. Here is a deity who thinks everything into existence, which is just an astonishingly, it's different, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But she also sang two divine sisters into being, Nautiti and Ixiti, or Uretsiti, is their various spellings. And they in turn sang from their bundles the firmament, the land, the seas, the people, the kachina, the gods, the plants, animals, minerals, language, writing, mathematics, architecture, the Pueblo social system, and every other thing you can imagine in this, our world. So that is now bringing into some focus here the kind of deity that Paula just read about, steeped herself in, and was always searching for. This is another piece from a different book of hers, Off the Reservation. These are reflections on boundary busting and border crossing. And she says in here, angry women, indeed angry people, are waking up everywhere. We have extremely excellent reasons for that anger, even for rage. I do not mean my remarks to be construed as critical of that anger. Goddess knows that our anger is not only just but necessary, that the planet we inhabit and love is to be healed. But our anger must be empowered by reason. It must feed us much on truth, beauty, delight, and freedom as it possibly can, so that it will at last yield the sweet fruit of love, peace, and re-entry into the world of the great mysteriousness from which we were evicted by a cruel and vicious godlet all too long ago, and from which we continue to exclude ourselves by furthering the designs of murder, genocide, denial, and misuse of the power to think, to be, to comprehend, and to love. And make no mistake, we do all that when we deny or discount the central significance of the feminine. Where I come from, God is a woman. Her name is Thinking. She is accompanied by her sister goddesses, Memory, and what I will translate as Intuition. She is an elder of the female gender, so she is called Grandmother, in recognition of the spiritual significance of proper relationships and of her revered place among us. And also Spider, maybe because she both spins and lives in the fragile, inordinately strong, potentially deadly, and ever wondrous web of all that is. So that is, again, another description that Paula is using to try to bring to the surface a deity that we can, turn to or understand something about or add to our knowledge about what deity might be. That here it is a consciousness and a being that is thinking.
Judy,
Audra, there's a little interference of mic stuff once in a while. I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. Maybe there was a plane that just went overhead. I'm outside by the pond. Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Or maybe it's the wind or something. What struck me as you read that is that the contrast of that, the acknowledgement of the anger as being needful, as being right,
yes,
in protection of life, and then the character, and then the love and the cosmological view, all of that she said, and then of this beautiful creator being, and all of that in contrast with calling feminists feminazis, or which is a more recent term, or they're just a bunch of angry women, and mischaracterizing the whole feminist movement, the second wave, and the first wave, etc., as being just anger. Is coming from love, and she said that so beautifully.
Yes, she said it so beautifully, and also just reiterating that it's necessary to be angry, the way the young school kids are finally angry at what is happening to them with the NRA and so on. Okay, so now I was with Paula, and of course I brought woman-centeredness as well, and there was, in addition to the women's spirituality movement, on the mainstream feminist movements, there were many feminist movements, I should say it that way. And one of them was a dyke movement, which we thought of ourselves as dyke warriors in behalf of women and social justice. So Paula engaged with that, and she had male partners. She was married twice to men, and had a male lover, and she had 2 women lovers. So I think we could say she was a bisexual person. But she wrote a poem about dykes, comparing dykes with Indians. And she was thinking about dykes of the time, and dykes of the time were spiritual seekers and social justice seekers, and as I say, women warriors. So it's in that context that I want to read these lines, which I quoted in a book that I wrote while I was with her called Another Mother Tongue. I wrote the last part of it with her. This is, dykes remind me of Indians. Like Indians, dykes are supposed to die out or forget or drink all the time or shatter, go away to nowhere, to remember what will happen if they don't. They don't anyway, even though it happens and they remember, they don't, because the moon remembers, because so does the sun, because so do the stars remember, and the persistent, stubborn grass of the earth. Well, I always liked that poem. That's why I quoted it, of course, in that book, is that she's making a commonality connection of oppressions and erasure of groups of people. And, of course, LGBTQ people are really under attack now from a very conservative government, and Native Americans are as well, fighting for their land and clean water and also protection of women on the reservation. There's some reservations, maybe it's all of them, where there's no law that applies to any white guy who wants to come on the reservation and break and perform a crime, including rape of women, isn't punished. So I'm speaking in a generality and from things that I've heard, not from being an expert in this by any means. But all I'm saying is that she was talking about the capacity to maintain oneself in the face of all opposition and all punishment and so on, and simply persevere in seeking social justice. And I'll tell you what, that gives meaning to a life beyond anything else in my own experience. So I want to read a love poem that Paula wrote about that has a women in love theme to it. And coming from the high desert of New Mexico, where I also grew up, rain is never equated with anything negative that I know, that I've ever heard, unless it's a flash flood that washes you away. But people in the city will complain about rain and equate it with gloominess and so on, and that's not what happens in the desert. In the desert, the mesquite and the dust to make it smell, it has this very hormonal, sexual smell, very musty and wonderful when it first hits the earth miles away and the wind blows it to you. It's just exquisite. So it's in that sense that I'm reading this poem that I quoted in part of it in Highest Apple by Paula Gunn. It's the poem is called Hanatya Woman, which means a female rain woman. Female rain is the more gentle rain. Water woman, that is the essence of you. Hanatya woman, that is recognition and remembering, gentle, soft, sure. Water woman, that is the essence of you. Hanatya woman, that is recognition and remembering, gentle, soft, sure. Long shadows of afternoon growing as the light turns west toward sleep, turning with the sun. The rest of it is continents and millennia. How could I have waited so long for completion? The water rises around us like the goddess coming home, a vision, some trip, all things considered, all times and visions, all places and spaces taken into account on that ancient journey, finally returned. The maps, the plans, the timetables, the carefully guided tours into all manner of futilities, manners, the last turn in the road, arid irony. Lady, why does your love so touch me? Lady, why do my hands have strength for you? Lady, how could I wander so long without you? Water in falls, misting and booming on the rocks below, tall pines in the mist, the deep-carved caves, water in rivulets, gathering speed, drops joining in headlong flight, unnamed rivers flowing eternally underground, unchanging, unchanged, water thundering down long, dry arroyos, the ancient causeways of our faith, trout over at last, carrying silt, bits of broken glass, branches, pebbles, pieces of abandoned cars, parts of lost houses and discarded streams downstream. Storms of water, and we, deluged, singing, hair plastered to our ecstatic skull, waving wild fists at the bolts hurled at us from above, teeth shimmering in the sheets of rain, the sheen, eyes blinded with the torrents that fall from, through, over them. Rain, the rain that makes us new, that rain is you. How did I wait so long to drink So that is, one of her tributes to loving a woman and loving the rain and being washed in it. Her sense of goddess, like mine, it was multiple. So she had spider grandmother, but as we'll see the next few things I read, she went in other kinds of directions as well. And one of the things that was most delightful to me about being with her is that we would have these lovemaking visions. I wrote about it a little bit in Another Mother Tongue in Chapter 9. We would have these, in other traditions they might be called tantrism or something. But it was just a very simple kind of thing that I think a lot of women experience, and men as well, of just a beautiful, very aesthetic vision of goddesses, and of golden light, and we could pass these visions back and forth to each other in our minds, and that that enhances your third eye perspective and your capacity to have more visions. I'm grateful to her that I learned how to do that, from her. But being with her, I came from a tradition much more broken than hers, a Scandinavian culture that I think had undergone the Inquisition and was very suppressed, and my own people were very, very frightened to talk about anything that was happening with them. As I talked about a little bit, I think, in the interview that I did with you about my own spirituality.
Yeah.
But with Paula, it was right there at the surface, and it was giving me permission to really explore the spiritual tradition that I myself had inherited. But that was a piece of it, and then there's things that she learned from all of this incredible study that she undertook to learn native traditions from all over the continent. And one of the most provoking to me and interesting poems of hers I want to read. It's called Takus Kanskan, or maybe it's Takus Kanskan, from a book of hers, poetry, Skins and Bones. And it's just yet another take on a Native American approach to spirituality through the words of the poet Paula Gunn. So Takus Kanskan, that history is an event, that life is, that I am eventually going to do something. The metaphor for God, eventuality, activity, what happens to be, what happens to me, God, history, action. The Lakota word for it is what moves, moves. They don't call God what moves something, not prime mover, first mover, who moves everything or nothing, action, lights, movement, not where or what or how, but event. God is what happens, is moves, moves. Riding a mare, eventuality, out of the corral into morning, taking her saddled and bridled, air thick with breath, moves, moves. Horse breath, my breath, earth breath, sky-breathing air, ing. Breathes, breathes, moves, moves, into cold, winter, spring, fall, corral, ing. Horse and breath, air, through the gate moves we. Lift we, the wooden crossbar, Naya, moves, moves, unlocks, moves, breathes, life breath of winter soul, swings wide, sweep corral gate, happens to be frozen stiff in place, happens to be cold. So I and Mare wear clothes that move in event of frozen, shaggy dressers for the air that breathes, breathe we, flows, moves. God, it's cold. No other place but move. Horse, me, gate, hinge, air, bright, frost, lungs, burst, swing, gate, far, morning, winter, air, rides, moves. Lakota say, God, what we do. Nice, huh?
Yes.
That was Paula Gunn using her poetry to describe a form of spirituality, I think very effectively.
Yes.
Yes. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Extraordinary. It moves.
Yes.
That will stay with me forever.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, one more thing from one of her books. This is Grandmothers of the Light, a Medicine Woman's source book. I want to read this because it's just interesting about medicine. So this is Paula Gunn saying, according to a large number of medicine traditions, the cause of the spiritual disharmony that has led to disease is a violation of some taboo. If, for instance, one abuses plants, a disharmony is created in the psychosphere, Psychosphere, which must be played out in some way until harmony is restored. Certain illnesses can be traced to mistreatment of a plant community, and treatment can be undertaken to restore harmony within the patient and within the plant community that has suffered. It is the loss of harmony, an inner world imbalance that reveals itself in physical or psychological ailment. It also plays itself out in social ailments, war, dictatorship, elitism, classism, sexism, and homophobia. This chain of actions consequence ensues because balance and harmony are fundamental laws of the cosmos. Disorder brings about a series of adjustments whose purpose is to reestablish harmony. So that's Paula on that particular piece of what goes wrong in our world. Take it and run with it.
It really comes from a different paradigm, from a paradigm that really encompasses that if something's out of harmony, it has to play out, and that there has been a violation made of in this case, the plant communities. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. So, one of the things that we want to think about is the contribution that Paula's work has made, and I think it's been pretty clear in what I've been reading from and talking about, that she created a portal, a framework for of critical writings and anthologies and so on, for people to understand the work of all of the many Native writers who surfaced in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and on into current times. She studied family and political systems of Native groups across America, as I've said, concluding that many were matrilineal, if not outright matriarchal, and identifying some of the central positions that women held. In the field of spirituality, her grounding in the Laguna and Plains Indian mythology of Grandmother Spider as creatrix, and this image of thought woman as it's just a significant contribution to consciousness studies that a female creatrix thinks reality into being. It breaks with some stereotypes that are prevalent in more mainstream belief that goddess is about only about sexiness and beauty, or the adulation of motherhood, or the equally adulation of Wonder Woman, as a warrior, or simply a being who once upon a time gave birth to everything. Thought Woman places consciousness in the sphere of the cosmos and in current time, in line with all those who practice divination, astrology, energy healing, oral reading, and so on. All these interactions with spirits, ancestors, and visions, and what Paula calls sendings. The female deities, I have to say, they are always in contact with male deities, even when she is creatrix. There is a sense of a family of deities, not a singular goddess. And this is similar to other forms of indigenous religions, from Yoruba and Santeria to village goddess religions in Asia, South America, Africa, and elsewhere. I'm calling them goddess religions simply because they include the sacred female and her contributions. In her poetry, Paula often thought to capture the psychic realm, a realm of dream and trance. She fought to write in what she understood was a native way of telling truths by revisiting the story from a different perspective. It's a circular kind of way of writing. And then adding in still another perspective while holding the possibility of all of them, however contradictory they might be. As a child of such diverse ancestrage, as she described her parents as descending from the first patriarchy, her Lebanese Maronite Catholic father, and the last matriarchy, her maternal great-grandmother, a Laguna, who left the tribe and the village. And Paula was sometimes critiqued by other Native women as untrustworthy because she wore lipstick, or critiqued by non-natives as too academic to be authentically Native, and so on. I must say, yes, she was critiqued, but she also she had a very successful career and engaged just all the way in the communities with Native women, Native writers, Native thinkers, and so on, as well as.
It's important to understand that a woman of her stature and of her complete dedication and her broad knowledge and in-depth work that she did, that even those women are criticized, and that it really needs to be just water off a duck's back, because their people will criticize some of the most beautiful things and integrous people. Yeah. So
yes. Or just simply not understanding what a mixed cultural life requires, and what it gives you. It gave her many different ways of approaching life, but it also gave her so many that it would spill over into stepping on other people's toes in particular kinds of ways. So, like many with mixed cultural heritage, she struggled to find a balance of a central axis, and she struggled with feelings of estrangement, and Audre Lorde wrote about that as well. The oral tradition is the one she understood as being just inherently Native, and it's the most flexible, whereas writing fixes a single point of view, and as we know, in fundamentalism, it can become absurd.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite cartoons is these two guys are carving words into a stone, and one is saying to the other, of course, we know they are never going to take any of this literally, but of course now, unfortunately, we know. Unfortunately, they did. Poets use metaphor on purpose to turn your mind this way and that way, not to fix you in place with a point of view that is just hopelessly out of date or irrelevant to the facts. So, but Paula wanted to bring the flexibility of multiple points of view into her writing, and her own sense of accomplishing her method I think she was given finally permission in the writing of her biographical novel, Pocahontas, the subtitle of which is Medicine Woman, Spy, Entrepreneur, and Diplomat. So here at last, editors allowed her to tell a story in as many different ways as she felt necessary. The result is not easy for linear minds to follow, but the idea of multiple lenses is vital for developing a multiversal, as differentiated from universal, understanding of varieties of knowledge and expertise. So I want to end by reading from an article that was written by Carly Shear that's titled Paula Gunn Allen's Sendings from Pocahontas, Engaging with an Unusual Reality. Pocahontas spoke to Paula Gunn Allen for more than 20 years. Allen explained to an interviewer that in 1978, after she had read the chapter on Pocahontas in Charles Larson's American Indian Fiction, she experienced the first of what she calls sendings from Pocahontas, an experience that persisted from time to time during the next 2 decades. The first sending resulted in her writing a poem in 1978, which you can find in one of her early poetry books. And hopefully there's going to be selections from her work. Someday there should be, complete publication of all of her poetry. That would really be a great enterprise for a publisher to take on.
Yeah.
But she's saying that this poem, Pocahontas, more or less said it to her, and she transcribed it. The fruition of the sendings coalesced into the 2004 non-fictional, mystic-laden biographical book Pocahontas, as I said. Mm-hmm. Pocahontas, I'm quoting now Carly Shear, Pocahontas did not speak in words, but as a sense of beauty, which Allen decodes for readers in a narrative that can seem meandering, magical, and repetitive, ultimately mirroring native oral tradition. The sendings, or what Allen often terms Algonquin whispers, are received from Pocahontas and the Manitou. The Manitou is, quoting Paula, a complicated term that relates to paranormal, supernatural, and transcendent conditions of consciousness and existence, unquote. The Manitou life circle, which encompasses both reality and an abstract reality that is unseen but no less real, is, quote, composed of both space and time, unquote, with all components of space and time, quote, moving, interacting, communicating, and exchanging information and energy, unquote. Within the Manitou life circle, people, therefore, like life itself, have neither beginning nor end. Allen, consequently, can convene with a woman who died 400 years ago because within the Manitou life circle, Pocahontas is as much alive today as she was 400 years ago. That ends the paragraphs that I'm quoting from an article by Carly Shear on Paula Gunn Allen's unusual engagement with an unusual reality. And I'd like to end this podcast of bringing out as much as I could of Paula's spirituality, that Paula will be in the Manitou life circle as well and be an unending force. I hope that listeners are enticed to engage with her work from that.
So be it. I join you in that wish. Absolutely. Judy, thank you for your generosity of heart and wisdom and time and love of Paula Gunn Allen and love for her work. I appreciate it, and I think that I want to point people to the fact that there will be links that they can go to that accompany this interview that could take them where to find Paula Gunn Allen's works and also to find the highest apple. And,
that's great. Well, it's my privilege to be able to engage with this work, of my peers. Life it moves so fast for those of us who are, engaged in trying to change the world. It's like being on a fast train. It just keeps moving forward. And I feel very grateful for this opportunity that, and you're doing this series of podcasts that I could go back in and once again engage with this work that I love so much from both Audre Lorde and Paula Gunn Allen. Really great spiritual teachers that everybody should know about.
Yes, and you've given that gift, and I so appreciate it. And everyone listen also to Judy Grahn's own interview. You will be very enriched by that. So that closes our interview for today. Again, thank you, Judy. It was just beautiful and very nourishing. Yes. Everyone out there, thank you for listening. You have been listening to Judy Grahn presenting Paula Gunn Allen. Thank you for joining us at the Four Mothers of Women's Spirituality Online Resource Center. We'll see you next time.